No, what I recited to you was the original Pledge of Allegiance written by Captain George Thacher Balch in 1885. It wasn't until 1954 that under God was added by the newly baptized into the Presbyterian Church, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who used under God and in God we trust formally on our currency to rally American sentiment against our Cold War enemy, the atheistic communist USSR. And it was also to signify, well, if God is for us, we can't possibly lose. This is not a nation under God. It is not a Christian nation. It never has been. Our forefathers were members of the Enlightenment period. They understood the evils of organized religion. In fact, John Adams said that the best of all worlds would be if there was no religion in it. They specifically built a secular government because they knew that true freedom does not exist without religious freedom, and you cannot have freedom of religion unless you have freedom from religion. The Treaty of Tripoli, which went into effect in 1797, was one of the very first documents of United States, the country, and it says in that document that the United States of America is in no way founded on the Christian religion. Our Constitution is not a religious document. It doesn't mention God or the Bible or call on God or the Bible. In fact, the only time it mentions religion at all is Article 6, Clause 3, where it says, no religious test shall be given to anyone who serves public office, meaning you cannot have a religious requirement for those who lead. The founding fathers were very clear. Christian nationalists have hijacked that rhetoric to pretend that they were something that they weren't, because Christian nationalists want power and money. They don't give a shit about Christ. And while our Constitution doesn't call on God or the Bible, there was a Constitution that did. It was the Confederate Constitution, who repeatedly called on God and the Bible and how God is on our side, because they also really like to use the Bible to own black people and rape black women, because they felt that it was their divine right as white men to do so. And since we're talking about the Confederacy, Captain George Thacher Balch, who wrote that Pledge of Allegiance, was a Union captain who believed that the Confederacy and their soldiers were traitors to the United States, and I'm inclined to agree with him.
Let me tell you a little story. You see, when I got stationed in Stuttgart, Germany, actually even before that, when I got stationed with MSSG 22, we had a colonel who loved military history. So under him, we had to study the Battle of Tripoli, especially since the Marine Corps hymn talks about the Battle of Tripoli. Is the first time Marines went out there and whooped the last sets. And so when it came to Tripoli, we had to study it. We had to read it. We had to read this treaty. And it just so happens that when I got to headquarters Marine Forces Europe, I had another colonel who was into military history as well and wanted to go to Thermopylae and all these kind of places. And he had us go through the Treaty of Tripoli, which I had already done a few years prior. So this was information that I already knew. And isn't it interesting, in Article 11 of the Treaty of Tripoli, it says that as the government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion, as it has itself no character of enmity against the laws, religion, and tranquility of the Muslimin, which is this is Muslims, and as the said states never have entered into any war or act of hostility against any of the Mohammedan's nations. So basically it's saying that America never participated in the Crusades, and America is not a Christian nation. Yeah, right there. Now, if you read the original languages a little, you got to understand how English wasn't spoken the same way we speak it now in America at that time frame. So the wording is a little different on things like shout, itself, and it's just a little bit different in some of those words. But the fact remains that America in itself, written by President John Adams. And yes, somebody is going to bring up that in the opening statements of the the Treaty of Tripoli, it states that this is from the United States, from the President of the United States, who is the most distinguished person of those who believe in the Messiah. And this has been used by some people to say that, oh no, it's saying right there, America is a Christian nation. But then Article 11 completely spells out that we are not a Christian nation. It's just that out of the people who believe in the Messiah, this president is the most distinguished person who does. Right now, I want you to put this in the actual right context. He's saying that the president of the United States is the most distinguished person who believes in the Messiah. That means he's more distinguished than the Pope, the kings and queens of England, more distinguished than they. And in his distinguished persona, he is saying that although he believes in the Messiah, and many people in the country believe in the Messiah, that the country itself of America was not built on the religion that believes in the Messiah. Therefore, we are not the enemy of Muslims. I want y'all to think about that. Early America, while there was still the Ottoman Empire, and this is one thing that people don't really consider or can rationalize in their brain, that when America was founded, the Ottoman Empire was still in existence. Let me give you something a little more closer to home. That during the Victorian age in England was the Wild Wild West was going on in the Americas. Those things happened at the same time. So while this John Adams was saying that he is the most distinguished person who believes in the Messiah, America is not a Christian nation. Clear. Now, when you read the Constitution, like she said, you only find one time when it mentions God, and it just says that a religious test can't be given. So therefore, it is not. This country wasn't found on Christianity. When you read the Federalist Papers, the Federalist Papers do not mention God as a reason to support the Constitution. But all the papers, the essays written against the Constitution references God in the Bible. That the Union didn't reference God in the Bible, but the Confederacy in their Constitution, in their doctrine of thought, referenced the Bible. What is the recurring theme here? The USSR was going against America. America was going against the USSR. The president then said, you know what, we're going to add in God we trust, and we're going on the money, and we're going to put one nation under God, 1954. This was a political play to galvanize people in their fears against communism. It really had nothing to do with religion. It was just to get y'all so caught up into your fear of communism that you would then stroke God onto it. Doesn't that sound similar to what they are doing today? That they're playing on the fears of Americans, and then they're putting a little glaze of God on top of it to make it, to justify it, to make you feel comfortable with it, when the real thing is just they want dictatorship control over Americans. It's as simple as that. But in order to get away with these lies, they need to compromise or complicate things with your cognitive dissonance that you have about your Bible. And isn't it interesting that God was used for the Confederacy, but they lost. God was used to go against the adoption of the Constitution, but they lost. Secularism was used for the Constitution. They won. Secularism was used during the Civil War, and they won. Seems like the Bible is down. And it wasn't God that ended the USSR. It was economics. It was economics. We outspent the USSR, at the same time outproduced more than the USSR. That is the only reason why we won. It had nothing to do with your God. Nothing at all. So that lady is so correct in her statements. At first I was like, I ain't got nothing to say. I just let her just go on, and I just sit here and just be like cheerleading. But I had to say something just to emphasize the points. America was not founded as a Christian nation. No. America, even the Constitution in our judicial system, follows more closely to the Code of Hammurabi, the Confessions of Mayat, more so than the Ten Commandments. So you Christians really need to study and come out of your cognitive dissonance and allow yourselves to see what real information and history that's out there. So always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.